You're at a dinner with friends. Someone casually mentions they just crossed $100,000 invested. Another talks about buying their second property. Someone else jokes about maxing out their 401k again this year. Nobody is bragging. Nobody is showing off. They say it the way people talk about the weather. Normal, casual, expected. You smile, you nod, you pretend it doesn't hit you. But on the way home, you open your banking app. Savings, $4,800. Retirement, $12,300. Student loans, still there. Credit card, manageable, but not gone. You start doing quiet math in your head. If I save $800 a month, that's $9,600 a year. At this rate, when do I actually feel secure? Then the real thought shows up. Am I behind? At 22, nobody expects you to have it figured out. At 25, you're still experimenting. But at 30, something shifts. 30 feels like a checkpoint. It's old enough to be responsible, young enough to still recover, but not young enough to ignore the math anymore. You thought you'd be further, more stable, more secure, maybe even ahead. Instead, it feels like you're maintaining, not building. Your income covers your life, but it doesn't feel like it's creating momentum, and that feeling is heavier than most people admit. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. By 30, comparison becomes unavoidable. People start separating into lanes. Some talk about investments and net worth. Others still talk about next paycheck. Some are thinking about freedom. Others are thinking about bills. And if you're in the second group, it doesn't mean you're reckless. It doesn't mean you're lazy. It doesn't mean you wasted your 20s. But it might mean you missed something structural. Most 30-year-olds don't feel financially behind because they failed. They feel behind because the rules quietly changed. The cost of living rose faster than salaries. Student debt stretched the starting line. Housing became harder to enter. And lifestyle expectations expanded with social media constantly reminding you what success looks like. So now at 30, you look around and wonder whether you're late. Not dramatically broke, not financially ruined, just behind. This isn't about shame, it's about clarity. Because the real question isn't, are you behind? The real question is, behind compared to what? And more importantly, if you are behind, how do you catch up fast without wasting another 5 years? Before you assume you've completely failed, let's look at the numbers. Because the story in your head and the statistical reality are often very different. According to Federal Reserve data, the median net worth for Americans under 35 is far lower than most people expect. Depending on the survey year, the median net worth for households under 35 sits roughly between $35,000 and $45,000. And that includes everything: savings accounts, retirement accounts, cars, investments, minus all debts. That's not liquid cash. That's total net worth. Now here's where it gets more uncomfortable. Student loan balances for borrowers in their late 20s and early 30s often range between $25,000 and $40,000. Credit card balances, auto loans, and personal loans add even more pressure, which means a large percentage of 30-year-olds are not sitting on six figures. They're balancing assets against debt. Some are slightly positive, some are barely neutral, some are still negative. So if you're 30 with $10,000 saved and some debt remaining, you're not uniquely broken. You're statistically normal. But here's the part that matters. Normal doesn't feel good. Normal doesn't feel secure. And comparison doesn't care about medians. When you see someone your age post about buying property, maxing retirement accounts, or hitting investment milestones, you're not comparing yourself to the median. You're comparing yourself to the outliers, the top 10%, the top 20%, and that distorts reality. At 30, the wealth gap starts to widen visibly. Some people began investing at 22 and never stopped. Some avoided major debt. Some had help from family. Some lived far below their means. Compounding rewards early starters disproportionately. So by the time everyone reaches 30, the difference between started early and started late begins to show. That's why it feels like you're behind. Not because everyone is ahead, but because the distribution spreads out. 30 isn't the end of the race. It's the first time the scoreboard becomes visible. And once you see the scoreboard, you can't unsee it. The good news? You still have decades of earning power. You still have time. But you can't rely on vague optimism anymore. You need structure. Because catching up isn't about working harder. It's about correcting direction early enough that compounding has time to work. One of the biggest reasons 30 feels financially behind is simple. The starting line moved. Previous generations entered adulthood with lower tuition costs, lower housing prices relative to income, and fewer subscription-based lifestyle expectations. Today, many people begin their careers already carrying financial weight. Student loans delay momentum. If you graduate with $30,000 to $50,000 in debt, your first years of income are not building assets. They are repairing the balance sheet. Instead of investing $800 per month at age 23, you may be paying $450 toward loans. Instead of building compounding early, you are neutralizing past obligations. That delay matters more than most people realize. Compounding rewards time more than intensity. Someone investing $500 per month starting at 22 often ends up significantly ahead of someone investing $1,000 per month starting at 30, even though the second person saves more each month. Time multiplies consistency. But when debt, high rent, and rising living costs push back the moment you can invest meaningfully, you don't just lose money, you lose early compounding years. By 30, the gap between early starters and delayed starters begins to show clearly. The early investor has 8 years of market growth. The delayed investor has stress and minimal assets. This doesn't mean you failed. It means you started under different conditions. But if you don't acknowledge that the starting line shifted, you'll misdiagnose the problem. The issue isn't effort, it's lost time, and how quickly you adjust once you see it. The second reason 30 feels financially behind has less to do with income and more to do with lifestyle expansion during your 20s. Your first real paycheck feels powerful. You move out, you upgrade apartments, you finance a reliable car, you travel more, you subscribe to everything that promises convenience. None of it feels reckless. It feels like progress. But lifestyle expansion compounds just like investments do. If your income rises from $45,000 to $65,000 and your spending rises at the same pace, your net worth barely moves. The raise disappears into higher rent, better furniture, more dining out, and small monthly commitments that stack quietly in the background. Streaming services, gym memberships, payment plans, upgraded phones, weekend trips. Individually, they look harmless. Collectively, they erase surplus. And surplus is the engine of net worth. Most people in their 20s optimize for experience, not ownership. They prioritize flexibility, social life, and visible upgrades. Investing feels abstract. Saving aggressively feels restrictive. So they tell themselves they will get serious later. Later becomes 30. Now the lifestyle is established, the fixed expenses are locked in, and cutting back feels like moving backward instead of forward. That's why 30 can feel financially tight, even with a decent salary. The habits built in your 20s determine whether your 30s begin with momentum or with maintenance. And if most of your raises were absorbed by lifestyle upgrades instead of assets, you didn't fall behind suddenly. You drifted there gradually, not through disaster, through comfort. The third reason 30 feels financially behind is not income, and it's not bad luck. It's the absence of a system. Most people move through their 20s reacting instead of structuring. They save when there's extra. They invest when they feel confident. They pay down debt when it becomes uncomfortable. There is effort, but there is no framework holding it together. Money comes in, bills go out, some savings happen, some months don't. That inconsistency matters more than the amount. Wealth rarely grows from motivation. It grows from automation. If you never built a fixed investing percentage, never automated contributions, never created a clear debt elimination order, and never defined a target savings rate, then every month becomes a decision. And decisions are exhausting. At 23, inconsistency doesn't feel dangerous. At 30, it becomes visible. Because without a system, progress depends on discipline, and discipline fluctuates. A structured system removes emotion from the equation. 15% automatically invested. Extra income directed toward highest interest debt. Emergency fund capped at a defined number. Raises split between lifestyle and assets. Without structure, raises disappear. Bonuses get spent. Windfalls get diluted. Years pass without measurable acceleration. That's why two people earning the same income at 30 can look completely different financially. One relied on motivation. The other relied on rules. Motivation fades. Rules compound. If you never built a financial operating system in your 20s, 30 feels like pressure instead of momentum. Not because you can't catch up, but because you've been steering manually instead of setting the direction once and letting consistency do the rest. If you're 30 and feel behind, the solution is not panic. It's structure and intensity. Catching up does not require a miracle. It requires compression, doing in 5 focused years what others spread over 10. Step 1. Stabilize immediately. Before investing aggressively, build a defined emergency buffer. Not a vague, some savings, but a target. 3 to 6 months of essential expenses. If your core monthly cost is $3,000, that means $9,000 to $18,000 in liquidity. This is not investment money. This is pressure relief. Without it, every setback becomes debt, and debt resets progress. Step 2. Eliminate high-interest debt fast. Any debt charging above 6 to 8% interest is mathematically competing against your investments. A credit card at 22% interest is not a small inconvenience. It is negative compounding. Attack high-interest balances aggressively. Redirect bonuses, tax refunds, and side income toward eliminating them. Every dollar of interest removed increases your future net worth growth rate. Step 3. Lock in a non-negotiable investment rate. At 30, casual investing is not enough. Set a fixed percentage, ideally 15 to 25% of gross income, and automate it. Retirement accounts first, then brokerage. If that number feels uncomfortable, that's the point. Compression requires intensity. You are buying back lost time with higher consistency. Step 4. Increase income strategically. Savings alone will not accelerate wealth fast enough if income stays flat. At 30, your earning potential is often still rising. Negotiate, switch roles, develop higher value skills, or build a scalable side income. Direct at least half of every raise toward assets, not lifestyle. Lifestyle can rise slowly. Assets must rise aggressively. Catching up is not about shame, it's about math. Stabilize, eliminate drag, automate growth, expand earning power. Do that consistently for 5 years, and 30 no longer feels behind. It becomes the turning point. If you're 30 and feel behind, here's the part most people won't tell you. You are not late. You are early enough for math to still work in your favor. At 25, mistakes feel harmless because time hides them. At 35, mistakes feel heavier because time starts narrowing. At 30, you sit exactly in the middle, aware enough to see the gap, but young enough to close it. That awareness is not a weakness, it's leverage. If you're 28 and watching this, you're ahead of schedule just by paying attention. If you're 30 to 32, this is your inflection point. If you're 33 to 35, urgency matters, but acceleration is still realistic. The biggest mistake is not being behind at 30. The biggest mistake is staying passive at 30. Because 5 focused years at a 20% savings rate can completely change your financial trajectory. 5 years of income growth directed toward assets can build 6 figures faster than you think. 5 years of consistency can erase a decade of drift. 30 is the first time the scoreboard becomes visible. But it is also the first time you can make fully adult financial decisions with clarity. You can keep comparing. You can keep scrolling. Or you can compress, stabilize, eliminate drag, automate growth, increase income. Do that, and by 35, you won't be asking if you're behind. You'll be asking how far you can go. 30 isn't the end of the runway. It's the moment you decide whether to take off. If this video changed the way you think, hit like and subscribe. More ideas like this are coming. See you in the next one.